The Omo River, often dubbed the Serpent River for its murky, turbulent ferocity, dictates the harshest laws of survival. Copa, a lion cub just a few months old, was learning that lesson in a painful way. During the pride's chaotic migration, a sudden current tore Copa from the warmth of his mother, thrusting him into the dangerous swell. Copa struggled in the cold water, relying solely on instinct. Exhaustion nearly caused him to give up, until his claws scraped onto a large, drifting log. This temporary lifeboat was all he could cling to. He braced himself, holding fast to the soaking wet. However, the real danger was not the current. Beneath the dark water, a massive shadow was shifting. Old Scar, the river's oldest and most dangerous crocodile, had spotted the solitary, easy prey. It rose silently, exposing only its cold eyes, tracking the terrified breaths of the shivering lion cub. On the log, Copa turned, and in that moment, the lion cub realized he was cornered. Copa's fear on the log was not entirely solitary. A short distance away, on the riverbank, Jake, an American conservation volunteer, was on a routine patrol with a German Shepherd, Ranger. Jake was not a typical ranger. He was a dedicated conservationist who had exchanged comfort for a life of preserving African wildlife. He believed that the timely presence and intervention of humans was essential to maintaining this fragile ecosystem. Ranger, with his keen sight and acute hearing, was a silent warrior beside Jake. He was more than a working dog. Ranger was a companion, an early warning system, and an extension of Jake's conscience in the wild. Their mission that day was to check for poacher snares and monitor migration routes, work that demanded absolute silence. Yet, that silence was shattered. Ranger abruptly stopped, his body tensing, his ears rigid and pointed toward the river. He didn't bark loudly, but emitted a low, urgent growl, a signal Jake knew well, imminent danger. Jake raised his binoculars. It took him several seconds to pierce the harsh glare reflecting off the water and realize the unfolding tragedy. He saw the log. He saw the desperate lion cub clinging to it. And most critically, he saw the dark, silent mass closing in. It was Old Scar. The crocodile was not moving quickly. It moved with a deadly certainty, like a submerged submarine, leaving only faint ripples on the surface. Old Scar had narrowed the distance. On the log, Copa felt the icy breath of the predator. The lion cub began to tremble violently, not from cold but from sheer terror. The first shriek, small and choked, escaped his throat, a futile cry for help sent into the void. Jake understood he was facing an ethical crossroads. Park laws strictly forbid interfering with the laws of nature, with a fight between predator and prey. But seeing the absolute terror on the lion cub's face through his lens, Jake could not stand by. This was not just survival. This was a slaughter, and he had the power to prevent it. Old Scar suddenly accelerated, its massive snout rising above the water. Its scarred hide, yellowish eyes, and jagged jaws were now clearly visible. The moment of confrontation was upon them. The lion cub Copa let out a desperate roar, clinging with all his might to the log, an expression of sheer pure desperation from a tiny creature driven to the absolute wall. In a fraction of a second, Jake had to make a decision that could change not only Copa's fate, but his own career in conservation. He looked at Ranger, who maintained intense vigilance, as if awaiting a command. The lion cub's life was now measured in breaths. Time appeared to freeze on the Serpent River. Old Scar's snout was mere feet from the lock. Its jaws were poised to snap shut. The lion cub Copa could only cling and shriek in futility, his cries drowned out by the rushing water and the predator's fury. Jake knew he had run out of time to weigh ethics against regulations. If the lion cub died, it would die because of his hesitation. He couldn't shoot the crocodile without endangering Copa or escalating the situation. He had only one shot: create chaos. He quickly pulled his rifle, aiming not at Old Scar, but firing a single warning shot into the air. Bang! The shot echoed, tearing through the deadly silence of the wilderness. The sound waves reverberated across the water. Old Scar flinched, its yellow eyes blinking in surprise. A creature that relied on stealth and silence. The crocodile was completely thrown off balance by the loud, alien noise. The decisive bite missed its mark. It submerged slightly, hiding beneath the murky water. This acoustic intervention lasted only 2 seconds, but that was the precious time Jake needed. He turned to Ranger, his eyes translating a silent command. Go, Ranger. Save him. Ranger needed no second bidding. With astonishing speed and power, the German Shepherd leaped straight into the dangerous Omo River. The cold, opaque water was an alien environment for the land-patrolling dog, yet Ranger did not hesitate. He swam like a torpedo, creating powerful wakes as he headed toward the log. Jake watched every move Ranger made, his heart pounding in his chest. Ranger had obeyed blindly, charging into the predator's most dangerous zone. The dog was swimming not to fight Old Scar, but to execute a shielding strategy. Old Scar, annoyed by the gunshot, was now further confused by Ranger's loud and aggressive presence. It surfaced momentarily, but its resolve to attack the Lion Cub was scattered. Ranger reached the log, barking loudly to keep the crocodile's attention. The dog used his wet muzzle to gently but firmly nudge Copa, an urgent offer of help, a guide towards safety. The Lion Cub Copa, utterly exhausted and stunned, stared into Ranger's determined eyes. The Lion Cub did what his instinct should have forbidden. He let go of the log. Copa surrendered his life to the strange, non-threatening creature that had just appeared. With his last reserves of strength, he began to swim with Ranger toward the bank. Ranger circled Copa, positioning his body between the Lion Cub and the spot where Old Scar had submerged. The rescue was not a battle, but a protective escort. Jake finally breathed a sigh of relief as the weak Lion Cub and the powerful Ranger reached the bank together. Old Scar, realizing it was outmaneuvered and intimidated by the two intruders on the shore, sank completely, retreating into the river's depths. Copa was safe. Copa dragged his exhausted body onto the muddy bank, where ancient roots formed a natural barrier. The Lion Cub gasped for air, his soaked body trembling uncontrollably. He was safe, but the shock of the near-fatal encounter was palpable. Jake quickly moved closer, keeping Ranger slightly behind him. He knew that even though Ranger had saved Copa's life, the Lion Cub's wild instincts could still view the dog as the next threat. He had to maintain distance, respecting the fragile boundary between intervention and intrusion. In that moment of silence, broken only by the sound of the river and Copa's ragged breathing, something extraordinary happened. The Lion Cub and Ranger looked at each other. It was not the look of enemies or predator and prey. Ranger stood firm, his eyes conveying a calm relief. Copa stared back, not with aggression, but with confusion and perhaps a flicker of instinctual gratitude. After the most terrifying moments of his life, the Lion Cub realized this foreign, four-legged creature meant him no harm. Jake sat down, assessing Copa's condition from a distance through his binoculars. He noted a small scratch on the Lion Cub's leg, but more importantly, the flame of survival in his eyes had not been extinguished. He gently stroked Ranger's head, whispering words of praise. The dog responded with a light tail wag, seemingly understanding that the most dangerous task was complete. This moment of peace did not last long. Suddenly, Jake heard a massive roar echoing from a dense bush. The roar was not a sign of attack, but the frantic, desperate call of a mother searching for her lost child. His mother, Jake whispered, relieved. It didn't take long for her to find him. Minutes later, the river reeds were torn apart, and Copa's mother appeared. She was a large, powerful lioness, her eyes burning with anxiety. She charged towards them, completely ignoring Jake and Ranger's presence. The reunion was deeply emotional. Copa's mother gently nudged the Lion Cub with her muzzle, licking his soaked fur, reassuring Copa with warm rumbles. Copa leaned into his mother, all tension dissolving in the familiar warmth. Jake signaled Ranger to retreat far back, hiding in the tall grass so as not to disturb the sacred moment. He had fulfilled his mission, holding the line between life and death long enough for natural law, the law of maternal love, to prevail. Copa looked back one last time toward the bushes where Jake and Ranger were concealed. The Lion Cub seemed to imprint the image of the two strangers who had prevented him from succumbing to the scythe of death. Then he nestled safely beside his mother, and the two quietly retreated, disappearing deep into the bush. The rescue was over, but the story of courage and interspecies connection had just begun. As Copa and his mother vanished into the evening mist, Jake and Ranger remained quiet on the muddy bank. The reunion they had just witnessed was not merely the end of a rescue. It was the confirmation of the belief Jake held in Africa. Ethical intervention does not spoil the law of nature, but sometimes it is the prerequisite for that law to continue. Jake patted Ranger's flank. The German Shepherd did not understand the complexities of human ethics or conservation laws, but he acted based on pure loyalty and bravery. Ranger was living proof that courage is not limited by species, and trust can overcome all survival instincts. In that moment, Ranger was not just a working dog. He was a guardian angel dispatched from the other side of the civilized world. The rescue of the Lion Cub Copa was more than a dramatic story. It was a profound lesson for Jake and for everyone about the limits of indifference. Jake realized that the line between letting nature take its course and saving a life was razor thin, but he believed he made the right choice. He chose to act on compassion, an element often forgotten in the brutal world of the survival struggle. Jake and the other rangers are the custodians of that belief. They're the last line of defense, protecting vulnerable creatures like the Lion Cub Copa, operating not for fame, but for love and responsibility toward life. They need support not only from governments, but also from the global community, those inspired by stories like this. Copa's story sends a powerful message to the outside world. We all face our own serpent rivers, moments when we are isolated, exhausted, and facing the old scar of life. Intervention, compassion, and connection, whether from family, friends, or a stranger, are the indispensable sources of strength that allow us to overcome. Jake and his fellow rangers are the embodiment of that belief. They're the front line, protecting creatures like the Lion Cub Copa, acting not for glory, but for love and responsibility towards life. They need support from the global community, those who are inspired by stories like this. The setting sun painted the sky red. Jake holstered his rifle and walked on with Ranger. Behind them, the river flowed, forever telling the story of a Lion Cub rescue, a heroic dog, and a man who dared to cross the boundary of silence. The survival of one species often relies on the intervention of another. This was the unlikely alliance forged on the muddy banks of the Omo River.